till about 4 years ago, most of SaaS marketing was very playbook driven. A lot of that is sort of thrown out of the window now with SEO sort of evolving into AEO.
What are the biggest mistakes companies still making in their GTM strategy?
One is this expectation that marketing has this magic wand that you start spending money and revenue will sort of start coming in. Mistake that companies still do sometimes is just not having a good handle on what their ICP is.
Should have not this been the job of the product development roadmap initially?
Slightly more evolved organizations, there is that there are processes to this. If you're thinking about some feature, how is this going to impact my TAM? How is this even with the existing customers, are there opportunities to kind of cross-sell, upsell, or even retention for that matter? Biggest challenge is that resistance from the teams.
Hi Raghav, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much, Jibs. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I'll take a minute and introduce you to the audience because I'm very excited about this chat. Today, we are joined by someone who has spent more than 14 years shaping growth strategies for the B2B SaaS companies, especially in the intersection of AI, product marketing, and demand gen. Raghav currently leads marketing at Beacon.li. So, welcome again. And I will start with the first question for you. Since SaaS is the speak and Beacon also helps a lot of SaaS and you've been throughout, I want to understand or summarize from you that B2B SaaS marketing, how has it evolved in the last 1 decade? And sitting here, I think we should also ask, how will it look in 1 year from now?
At least till about 4 years ago, most of SaaS marketing was very playbook driven. We had playbooks for pretty much everything, whether it's a product launch, whether it's whether it's paid search or organic. There were certain activities that you just had to do, which were hygiene. I think a lot of that is sort of thrown out of the window now with SEO sort of evolving into AEO, people using less sort of search. Most of there being so much content out there, which is being generated by AI for being read by AI. So I think how it's kind of evolved is that there's a lot more emphasis now on experimentation, trying out different things. There's a lot more emphasis on creativity now in marketing. I think we'd somehow lost that along the way. So I think at least the way I see it, taste, judgment, creativity, all of these things will sort of come to the forefront in marketing.
Because you're working with smarter employees and smarter tools, right? You have to be more creative. Right? Yeah. What are the biggest mistakes companies still are making in their GTM strategy?
This is something that's been consistent in a lot of places that I've seen over the past so many years. One is this expectation that marketing has this magic wand that you start spending money and revenue will sort of start coming in.
Yes.
The expectation to kind of drive pipeline, the expectation that deals will start closing faster.
Yeah.
But I think one mistake that companies still do sometimes is just not having a good handle on what their ICP is and what their messaging needs to be for that ICP. So I think irrespective of whatever you're selling, I think you need to have a good handle on who you're selling to, what their motivation is, and whether they actually have a need for the product. If not, is there an additional use case that you could potentially add, which would add value to maybe an adjacent sort of function or job title.
I got intrigued with what you said. So tell me something, since you work with most products which are evolving, right? Now, let's say this part was also done, but see, when you start making a messaging, even for a certain segment of customers you chose, okay, your product still might be missing something, right? There could be a missing part. The customer would need something. You find out the biggest bunch of customers who have the biggest problem, but you still are not solving it. Does this often go back in a tool where you have how fast have you seen the products reacting to it and then making the story actually stronger? Because in a way, when you do all this, when you have conversations that marketing gets, you come to understand this. Do people react to it? Is that something has been taken throughout back to the system, to the product again?
That is where product marketing has to be really solid. Now, it's usually a function or like a term that's used and abused across technology companies. But I think product marketing, if empowered, can sort of work very closely with the sales team to get feedback on what is happening in the sales conversations. Owning the gap analysis of the product, what is the
Yes.
feature parity and stuff like that, and then kind of feeding that into the product team so that they can prioritize certain things in the roadmap. So yeah, absolutely, I think.
In your function, let's say wherever you design a org structure, do you get the product marketing to work very closely with you? You head the marketing, if I would say, right? Most places you have been. So do you get the product marketing to talk to you more also apart from the sales team, or you expect the sales and the product to come back with the perfect product and then you find your ICP and messaging story and work around it?
In certain organizations, they are a subset of product, and in certain companies, it's a subset of the marketing team.
Yeah.
Right now, irrespective, there are three stakeholders that they have to work with. The sales team to disseminate information about the product and also gather feedback on what so for example, if they're owning sales enablement, they're creating pitch decks, they're creating collateral.
Yeah.
What is the typical feedback that they're receiving from customers, the sales team, right? So they're
Hmm.
relaying that feedback to the rest of the marketing function, also going back to the drawing board to kind of work on different iterations of the messaging, and then relaying some of that information to the product team as well. If there are feature gaps and things like that. So usually, the way I see it, it's a threefold thing. One is providing information to the sales team for how to sell, providing information to the rest of the marketing team, setting the guardrails for how the product needs to be talked about. So the messaging, the positioning needs to be owned by the product marketers, and then also working as a feedback loop for the product team on what certain gaps are, and then also getting information from the product team. So usually what happens in tech companies is that the product folks build a feature,
Yeah.
and they tend to fall in love with it, and they feel like this
Yeah.
is going to be a game
Sell
changer.
the subs. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the product marketer's job to kind of figure out how to sort of set prioritization for those features or define tiers, right? So basically, the way I look at it is a three tier framework. One is tier one, tier two, tier three. So tier one is any feature that's being built which will change the TAM of the company. So it increases your TAM significantly because it's a brand new feature which will open up newer functions and things
That's
like that.
creating markets, right? That
Correct.
is one of our themes this time,
Correct. And tier two is where it's accelerating existing deals, or there are opportunities to cross sell, upsell.
Yeah.
And then there are tier three, which are basically just feature enhancements and stuff. So they have to kind of figure out how to break this down into the different tiers, and then depending on that, what is kind of bandwidth they need to allocate to this across the board. So
Very true. If I could look at it, I was thinking about the three pillars. When you said tiers, I can see them as equally strong pillars by which it's standing. The entire product marketing function, right? I think wonderful. So tell me something from here. What I think is, should have not this been the job of the product development roadmap initially when you developed the product? I'll tell you from where I'm coming. Recently, I was talking to one of my clients and they have about 9 products. They have 9 products made, okay? And those products have been, usually it was made as an accelerator or supporting their services business. Now they want to market it as a product, get into market. So maybe they don't have that story, but had I wanted to launch a product, I would have first done the white cap analysis, and then brought it in such a way only if it has, like you brought a wonderful point, the addressable market itself, then we are creating our own market, right? So is this missing in a lot of places? Do products just appear from somewhere, or have they done this research? Have they done this, study and then come back?
I think yes and no. In slightly more evolved organizations, there is that there are processes to this where you have to if you're thinking about some feature, how is this going to impact how is this going to impact my TAM? How is this even with the existing customers, are there opportunities to kind of cross sell, upsell, or even retention for that matter? It's usually a pattern in a lot of startups where you build a lot of features for one client. And I've worked at organizations where we've made that mistake where if let's say if one client is responsible for over 30 or 40% of your revenue, you end up bending over backwards to build new features for them. But then you realize that it's not really worth it because there's no one else who's going to be buying it. It's like a custom
And then
requirement.
you need to go back to your drawing board and tweak it and then make it.
Right.
One step back will help. Then we all are good.
Correct.
I
Yeah.
think we all are good. Wonderful, wonderful. So I think we spoke about the right bit when we started. I'll move to the second section where I would want to understand how does demand gen look for you in the AI era? Let's say funnels, traditional funnels, first of all.
Yeah, so I think the traditional funnel is definitely out of the window where, you were sort of creating a bunch of gated content, building MQLs, and then eventually these MQLs, you would pray that they would move further down the funnel, turn into SQLs, and then, the marketing team would celebrate the minute there was someone from a large logo, irrespective of whether they're an intern or not.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think that's changed quite a bit. Also, the way we sort of look at channels now is evolving. Like, for example, uh, paid search was almost like this demand tax that you used to pay, right? Because it's a given that you need to target your competitors' keywords. You need to look at a bunch of keywords and then sort of target. I just hope that you get relevant folks coming in.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of emphasis on SEO where you would just kind of get backlinks.
Yeah. Tell me about backlinks now. But
Yeah,
I always had a hunch. It's not about it. It's about what you really have out and are you communicating the right content. Even if
correct.
it's long or short, it just
Correct.
had to be there. Yeah.
And the thing is that the bar is really like, so what has happened now is that it's become so easy to create content that it's not that big a challenge anymore, and people are not like, there's almost like this removal of a discovery layer altogether. So
Yeah.
recently there's this company called Tailwind which had to lay off almost 75% of their engineering team because a major source of discovery used to be their website where they used to have the user docs. Now, because these vibe coding tools are using Tailwind by default, people don't actually go to the Tailwind website or even explore their paid tools. So they're just using the open source framework and that's it. So that entire discovery layer is sort of disappearing now. So, HubSpot now is sort of losing so much of their traffic because they built their entire business on creating, tons and tons of content, which was
Right.
like, starting job descriptions for positions and
They
CV.
had everything. They had everything. Now nobody goes there.
Yeah,
I
so
remember when we used to have interns, we used to tell them first subscribe to HubSpot and read an article every day and come back to the cabin.
exactly. That used to be the Bible for anyone who's sort of in B2B marketing. But yes, so now you can just kind of chat GPT or Claudio way through everything.
You can until it hallucinates. But
So I think in terms of this thing, what is also happening is that there is a lot more emphasis on events now.
yeah.
So
Why has that happened, Raghav? See, you have so many discovery tools. Could you not be sharper? Like, what's happening? Why events? And then where's the funnel coming from first? If not from
sure.
the traditional place. Yeah.
So I think there is still a lot of emphasis on discovery tools. So you still have your Clays and Apollos of the world where
Yeah.
you're kind of doing the prospecting and you're doing the outreach. But I think in-person connection has become a lot more important now because what is lacking is that it's very easy to create anything on ChatGPT, whether it's your email or a script for
Right.
video and stuff like that. So what people are now craving is authenticity.
Credibility. Yes.
Yes, credibility.
Knowing, did you write it or were you really that person who thought about it?
Exactly. So I think
Yes.
so I think people are now craving authenticity and real connections, which is why people sort of starting to go back to in-person events. Personally, we've also kind of noticed that that's where we have a much higher success rate compared to kind of going out cold or and also what has happened is that with tools that help you automate LinkedIn, even your LinkedIn inbox is full of spam nowadays.
Raghav, also this that because tools are there and eventually people will understand how to use it. They'll struggle a bit but they'll get the better of it. But once that is done, it's done. What else do you do? Then, sometime back, I think it's a good thing it happened now. When leads or funnels were there, you remember the sales guy used to think if this has come from the marketing, it has to crack in the first call. I forget my old sales. I don't care about sales. Now,
There's intent. Yeah.
so they feel they have done this is order click here. The order has come right into my door, but that's not true. Old sales was still there. In this garb of SaaS based selling and marketing, we all want to sell online, but there is a part of us who wants to be said because even in SaaS, it's a plethora of SaaS right now. What will you choose? You need a personal connect. So I think now we have more time to go to events. We have more time to go, because I think we'll automate this fast, and then you work on the right list. And why not go and meet them? Give them a tangible relationship. You agree that that could be also there?
I'm not sure if automation is helping, because what happens is, earlier it used to be like a cold start problem, right? Because
Right.
you had to start out cold. You had to kind of imagine what you're going to put in that email. Now that cold start is gone, so work feels less like work. But what is happening is that we're working a lot more.
Yes, we are. We are,
So,
because the amount of it picks your brain, and then they don't work after a point, right? I don't think it really works at this
yeah,
stage.
so
You will have to work then, and then you
right.
started, and you're like, oh, I have to end it. Then you start working harder.
Yeah.
That kind of a feeling. It's fun. Let's hope it all works out for us. Okay, okay. So in this, I'll just ask you more about the content and thought leadership play. How would you rank that, or how have you seen that coming out to be the stronger part, if it does?
People still trust humans way more than they would trust a brand,
Yes.
at least in the initial stages. And I speak on behalf of startups that I work with. I think if and what I've been learning is that it's the leadership team that has to kind of build that brand and sort of share the story, and its authenticity that's going to sell. So just kind of talking about the struggles behind the scenes, what you're building, what are the pain points that you're kind of addressing, and things like that. In fact, even with ads, what we've noticed is that we've seen better engagement with thought leadership ads
Yeah.
when we're targeting, let's say, accounts on LinkedIn.
Yes.
It's a thought leadership ads that actually do better in terms of building awareness, as opposed to kind of being very salesy or trying to push a piece of content that's coming from the brand. So I think it's become a lot more about what your point of view is, and there's some examples as well.
Yeah,
Like
give me the recent or the most beautiful example that you saw
yeah,
that
so I
is
think,
happening.
like, for example, there's this company called RB2B, which does human, like, person level de-anonymization on your website. The entire company, the entire brand is sort of, it's a bootstrap company, but the kind of awareness people have about it is probably better than
Exponentially
most
than
venture backed
others. Yeah, yeah.
companies out there, because the CEO has a very strong personal brand. Then closer to home, I think there are examples like Sanas, where
Hmm.
the leadership team is very active on LinkedIn. They share a lot of stories behind the scenes, so that kind
Yes.
of adds a layer of authenticity and
Right.
builds more trust with potential
Thought
clients.
leadership, I think, linked back to the credibility. I understand. People want real people still, and they miss it even more now. Okay. So I think the next important part, which we talked about, I think, but we should bring in AI. How do you turn this into business outcomes? Okay. When I say that, why do you think so many AI projects still fail to deliver the measurable ROI?
There are different issues, right? So one is that a lot of times the mandate for adoption of AI kind of comes from a center of excellence, or there might be like a CIO or CTO mandate to kind of adopt AI. One challenge is usually resistance from the teams to kind of take it to completion. The other, I think, is also just the data is super messy. So just kind of making sure that your data is in the right place for it to be kind of processed by an LLM or any sort of model. Then the other issue is especially with the more regulated enterprises. I think it's also around having the right guardrails in place. Uh,
Right.
so the kind of POCs that we've seen, we have a much higher success rate of POCs kind of going into production, because it kind of works over the UI, and it kind of delivers the outcomes at the same time. So if you're expecting the customer to share your entire database, you're expecting them to kind of expose a bunch of APIs, there's going to be a lot more resistance. So a lot of different things can be done, but you need to figure out where your inefficiencies lie, and then kind of
That's
using
a
that to
nice article, Raghav. Maybe you should write one for the marketing teams, the framework for setting up AI based EA. So I was talking, the last chat that we recorded was somebody from another company which is very AI first, somebody from Zycus. And so he said in his company too, he had a 3-step approach. First they let people do whatever they want to do, because anyway the product was AI based, they do that. And then they have 3 dimensions in which they measure. So it was interesting. So when all of his stories come out, we could have a great story at the end.
right.
I think we're coming close to closing, but I'll still ask you quick questions. What everybody wants to hear. Tell me your favorite marketing stack as of now. Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of some of these traditional tools, because I think a lot of people are talking about CRMs and like these systems of record dying. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, because it's still very important to have a CRM in place, especially because of the deep integrations that they have
Yeah.
and the years of expertise that they've kind of built over time, right? So there are a lot of these proprietary integrations that they have, the proprietary information that they carry, the context that they currently carry. So I think it's still not going anywhere. So I think it's very important to have a CRM. I am usually partial to HubSpot, but sort of experimenting with a lot of different tools. I think in terms of prospecting, it's important to kind of have a tool for prospecting. We've experimented a lot. Like before we started this chat, we were talking about Clay. I think it's a great tool to kind of scale outbound. I think one of the bottlenecks used to be kind of throughput, even in terms of building the top of the funnel. But I think tools like Clay, Bitscale, and so on are actually increasing the throughput, reducing the dependence of the SDR team on kind of doing the outbound activity. So I think
Rather constant conversations, and before that, the correct accounts at least they're in place.
correct. So I think, and also now, like for example, we were having conversations with different companies for sort of getting AEO tools, which help you identify, okay, what are the answer engines, how much are they mentioning you, what is the typical source and stuff like that. Now, like over the last 2 days, I've kind of been I've been able to build something in house for us, just based off of our custom requirements.
Okay.
And so yeah, I think it's also possible to build a lot of these tools internally now. So but I think it's still important to have an automation tool for your newsletters and stuff. It's we've also been trying out different tools for just kind of managing our events, just to kind of looking at different vendors and things like that. So there's a CRM that we have in place. We're also kind of using an ABM tool, which is not. So for a company of our scale, it's overkill to kind of use programmatic, and also programmatic with browsing becoming a lot more cookieless. It's LinkedIn sort of becomes this primary channel for advertising. So we're sort of experimenting with this ABM tool that focuses on just LinkedIn to kind of build one-to-few sort of segments without burning a hole in your pocket. So yeah, those are some things that we've been using, which have been working really well for us.
Super. And still, what do you tell your board, when you have to answer from a marketing, how spotlight on your revenue, how was the conversion? This is the answer for help to all your CMOs around there.
Yeah, so it's a tricky one, but I think it's very important to have at least a flywheel sort of an effect in one or two channels. So typically what is important is to identify that one channel that works for you. Right. But again, your mileage may vary depending on what kind of business you are in. So if it's, let's say, if it's a self-serve sort of a tool with where the ticket size is lower, digital channels will still work well. A less targeted approach might still work, but for a company like ours, where it's a very set sort of a ICP and a target account list that we follow, it's very important to kind of have ABM tools that allow you to pinpoint what kind of pipeline you're generating versus what kind of money you're spending, and how much are the conversion rates and things like that. So usually what we do is, for us, for example, events have worked really well, and it's not necessarily the large format trade shows, but it's the mid-sized to closed door events that have worked really well for us. So we're sort of doubling down on that, but at the same time, we have budgets for experimentation. So we have these one to few sort of segments that we run ads for, but then we are also trying out other channels where we can kind of get this. So I'd say start with that one hero channel, then kind of double down on that, and then experiment, and then scale more channels. So that's ideally. So at least when you are in a board meeting, it's easy for you to justify why you're spending on that one particular channel and why it's working for you.
Excellent way to start with. So tell me, what is the next exciting thing you're looking at?
So I think just the whole democratization of these developer tools, just being able to kind of build some of these things in-house rapidly is something that I'm very excited about. I'm
Yes.
also excited about the fact that there is a lot of emphasis now again on creativity and judgment. So one of the things that I actually started missing was writing, and I've started rediscovering my passion for writing and coming up with quirky ideas and stuff. So we almost have this newsroom or a writer's room sort of a thing that we do every morning, where there's a stand up where we come up with the wildest ideas that we can think of, and then we see which ones can actually fit into what we do. So there are no crazy ideas. So that's something that I'm excited about. I think this whole nothing is out of question now. I think the only limit that you have is your own creativity.
Wow, wow. I love the way we close this discussion with a hope creativity defines marketers, right? And we're back there. And in the world where we were thinking it's going to get doomed, that's a great way to open up the whole new world. So I'm so happy we closed on this note. Thank you so much, Raghav.
All right, thank you so much, Ipsita.